This week on the Yoakum Strength podcast, we have on Antonio Squillante. Antonio is a professor at PLNU and a strength coach for the USA Cycling National Sprint Program. Throughout the episode, we talk about cultural differences in training, translating the CSCS textbook to Italian by hand, leaving Italy to pursue internships in the United States, the validity of various metrics, and why monitoring fatigue should be used to train harder, not easier. This was an incredible episode, and as always, thanks for listening.
Before we hit the intro music, I wanted to introduce to you guys the Yoakum Strength Insider. The Yoakum Strength Insider is our online training platform that takes all of the ideas that we talk about on this podcast and implements them into a program that is available to you at the touch of your fingers. Our goal with the Yoakum Strength Insider is to create better movers, to level up your life, and to move forward from where you are. We do this in a holistic fashion. Not only will you receive a program that has helped hundreds of people become better movers, you'll also receive access to our app that allows you to track everything, has video links for all exercises, and allows you to be in constant communication with a Yoakum Strength coach. Along with this, you'll get our 30-page PDF nutrition and lifestyle guidelines. That includes everything from what to eat, how much of it to eat, why we're eating it, meditation habits, and other lifestyle habits that we implement with our clients to really level up their lives. If you're interested in trying out one of these programs, use podcast 25 in the discount section right before you pay for 25% off your first program. Boom.
This is the Yoakum Strength Podcast. Take the leap down the rabbit hole with us as we interview elite level guests to unravel what high performance really is.
All right, well, Coach, welcome to the podcast. Excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the third Italian on the podcast. I was just telling you about how we had Henry and Umberto. They just came and interned for us, and we had them on the podcast and kind of talked to them about life. But the Yoakum Strength Italian pipeline is growing.
Happy to see that. That's a good sign.
It's a great sign. You and I were talking before we started the podcast about how one of the things Henry and Umberto were telling me about, and like I didn't really think about, but training in Italy, it's in the infancy stages. It's like the culture around strength conditioning and sports performance is just not there yet. And it's starting to get the ball rolling. And it sounds like even within the past 5 years, it's made like massive growth in people actually being like, I need a strength coach. I need a sports performance coach rather than just going to play soccer all day long, which is what they were talking about when they started doing the strength coaching stuff. They came to the States and like, man, everybody shows up to train. Everybody's talking about training. And in Italy, it's like pulling teeth to try and get people to understand like why you need to do this. I'd love to hear kind of your background in like coming from Italy, coming from that like culture experience, and then like being in the States now. Like, what has that been like for you? How has that like cultural shock been? How is that like, and where do you kind of like see it going to the worldwide and international pursuit of sports performance?
It was a cultural shock, that's for sure. Because I was born and raised in Italy. I grew up in Italy, and I grew up playing sport at somewhat of a decent level. Like I ended up playing 4 years professional football, American football in Italy. So it's not that big of a deal in terms of like sport. It's professional because there's a professional league. They don't really pay you that much. It's not like soccer or basketball or volleyball or anything like that. But the level of competition is still pretty high. And we used to play around Europe quite a bit. So I grew up in the system. And I also, my first experience in college for my undergraduate degree was in Italy. So exactly what your interns went through probably in college. So I've seen the transformation through the years. So when I started, just to give you some context, well, of course, we all know that American football is a sport that requires a lot of strength and conditioning. The NSCA was kind of like funded on strength and conditioning for American football. If you look at the book, The Strongest Shall Survive, or like Bigger, Faster, Stronger, was mostly focused on American football. When I played in Italy, we didn't have, so that was early 2000, so maybe like 2009, 10, 11. We didn't have a strength and conditioning coach on staff, far from it. We didn't even know what a strength and conditioning coach was to begin with.
Did you become the honorary one for the team?
No, boy, I wish. What happened is that some of our coaches, one of our coaches went to attend a seminar about football, And someone brought in a photocopy, not even the original book, a photocopy of Bigger, Faster, Stronger. And the guy came in the locker room and said, that's your strength and conditioning program. Don't bother about reading the book. Just look at the tables, go in the gym and do the exact thing. And you're going to be fine.
That's awesome.
So, okay, cool. I can do that. And I did it like most of us did at that time. And it was mostly like a glorified bodybuilding / powerlifting type program. And it got me really strong, like really, really strong. At my heaviest when I played, I was 315 pounds.
Oh, damn.
I think my heaviest squat was in the mid 800. So I was a big dude, and I could move weight, but I wasn't athletic at all. So I slowly started to realize that, yes, I was clearly strong. I was decent at the sport in terms of skill, never the best, but decent enough to like play decent football. If I wanted to get better, I had to find a way to, for lack of better terms, transfer that strength into like power and speed and all that good stuff. So I learned to do some research on my own and figured out what strength and conditioning was all about. So I actually first joined university to study biology because I thought learning more about the human body and human physiology would teach me that. And then I slowly shifted towards what we call in Italy sports science, which is broadly speaking something similar to like health science and kinesiology in the US. Has nothing to do with performance, far from it. Is completely governed, it's under the broader category of like medical sciences. So it's mostly a byproduct of the clinical setting. There's mostly fitness, rehab, injury prevention, metabolic testing and conditioning, nothing about strength training. I never learned about strength training in class. Never even saw a barbell in my 4 years of university. But that was my starting point. And then as I grew into the, I got exposed to the NSCA. I figured out what the NSCA was, flew to the state, did my CSCS, and started reading different books, different textbooks. That's how I kind of like took a different path, which eventually brought me to the States. I feel like the situation in Italy now is definitely different because, as you can see, there are practitioners that call themselves strength and conditioning coaches. So they're aware of that. It's a different profession. I don't think the university system is quite there to provide that type of education. I'm lucky enough to be a external member for external faculty member for quite a few students that are doing their PhD or graduate studies in Italy. And I see what they're studying at university. I don't think the curriculum is still up to speed. It's too updated and too old, too clinical in that sense. So I don't think students are quite prepared for this type of job. But through social media and YouTube and papers and whatnot, they're getting more and more exposed to sports performance. So bottom line, if you were to compare the way I started 20 years ago and the way they're starting now, I started learning from powerlifting, which is very American style. Like that's how the NSCA kind of started. They're starting at least from a foundation of sports performance. So they do sprinting, they do plyometrics, they do Olympic lift, they do a lot of stuff that I didn't know what it was to begin with. So I think they're at a much better place now to like start growing this new profession, if you will.
What was it that eventually made you come to the United States and want to live here and eventually like find a career here? I feel like that's a pretty big step to want to uproot from what you're used to and travel to a new country to start a career in something that you just said like, oh, I didn't even necessarily feel prepared for.
Oh, I wasn't prepared for, far from it. Suffice to say that I took my CSCS when I was 21. And just to give a little bit of context, I did not study English in school. So my English was 0 when I was 20. I went online. I couldn't even sign up for the CSCS because they had no option for international members. So I had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, call Colorado Springs, had them fax me a form to sign up for my CSCS, register for it, and then I had to go on Amazon, order the textbook, and order a dictionary to be able to understand the textbook. It took 6 months for that to be delivered to me in Italy. Then I had to I still have the original second edition of the textbook. Every line is translated on top from English to Italian for me to understand it.
And you translated all of it by yourself?
every single word of the manual to be able to understand it. That's how I pretty much learned English. Flew to the States, to a random location. Of all places, they signed me to Long Beach to do my CSCS because it was the only one available. Flew in, took my CSCS, passed it, luckily, went back home. I tried to start working in Italy, but it wasn't going anywhere because, again, there was not such a thing as strength and conditioning. So I think it was 2010 or 11. I heard of this thing called like internships that you can do and learn from practitioners. So I remember I still have my old Gmail account just to go back and look at it every now and again. I sent out 107 emails asking to do an internship. I got 2 replies. One said, "I'm sorry, we couldn't take you." And that was from Santa Monica College. Another one was from Anna Maria College in Boston. And they said, like, "We have a spot available. We can't pay you, but we can give you room and board. If you want to come and learn, you can come." So that's kind of like the thing that started it all. And that was the true shock, like the 100% cultural shock, because I never spoke English. I just read English to pass the exam. And now I'm exposed to all these kids from all over the US, all with different slangs and accents and way to say things. So it was quite intense. And it was a small Division 3 program, tiny Division 3 program. And we had 3 squat racks with 3 barbells for 98 kids to coach at the same time. So that was the very first experience with strength and conditioning. It was awesome. And from that point on, I think, like, well, you guys know, one thing leads into the other, and you start rolling from one internship to the other. Eventually, you get your first paid job. And then I decided to go back to school. So I started applying for GA positions that were not, and then eventually transitioned me from Europe to the States. It was a process. It didn't happen overnight, but it was a fun one. Looking back at it, it was definitely a fun one.
Dude, that's legendary. I never want to hear an American intern complain about the internship process and trying to get a strength conditioning job again, bro.
Oh, listen,
you translated an entire book by yourself.
One more thing, which is 100% true, and you can verify that. When I called the school that I was supposed to do my internship to, which is Anna Maria College, is in Paxton near Boston. So I called them and I said, like, first of all, tell me where I need to go. And this college is in a city called Worcester, but they don't say Worcester. They call it Worcester. That's their accent. So I couldn't find it on the map. And they say, just show up and we'll give you room and board, which I assumed was an actual room with meals. And in fact was an empty room with no bed, no closet, no furnitures, and a car to get food at the cafeteria. And I didn't know where to buy a bed. I was too embarrassed to ask for a bed. So I did my entire football season sleeping on the floor, and my pillow were my clothes that I brought from Italy. So when people complain about internship nowadays, they have to consider that they have it quite easy.
Dude, that is a legendary story right there. That is dope. I want to bring it back a little bit to your 800-pound squat days, because it sounds like you kind of had a very similar upbringing in the strength conditioning world as me, where it's like I was kind of not told, but like I had this belief that the stronger I got in the weight room, the better I was going to get on the field. And right away it worked, just because I had no strength and I got really strong. You also had the puberty aspect. I started in high school, like getting bigger and just more explosive. So right away I saw like benefits on the field. And then I kind of hit that point that you were talking about hitting, where it's like I was getting stronger in the weight room. I remember this day so vividly. My freshman year on the college football team, I was cleaning like 350 pounds. This dude, the starting senior linebacker next to me, looks like the biggest dad-bod of all time. Upright rowing 150 with like the worst form in the world. And I'm like, I am set, dude. Like, I got this. I'm the strongest guy here. I got this. That same day, we go to practice. We have like this, it's like an ISO play. He meets me in the hole, and dude, I have never been hit that hard in my entire life by the same dad bod dude I just saw barely cleaning 150. I'm laying on the ground. He like picks me up, like pats me on the head, tells me like, you got it next time, bud. And like, that was such a light bulb moment to me of like, oh my fucking God, dude. Like, there's something different going on here that I need to like dive deep into. What was that kind of like process? Like, when did you reach that point? You're like, man, like I'm squatting 800 fucking pounds and like, I'm not like, what is it? Like, why? What, there needs to be something more here. There needs to be like a deeper dive into sports performance and strength conditioning and applying this thing to the field? What was that kind of journey like for you? And did you fall into any weird little rabbit holes trying to go down that journey? Because I know for myself, I tried a bunch of different shit trying to be like, okay, that one didn't work, so now I'm going to go to all these other extremes to see which one works. And like eventually found my way into a middle ground of like, okay, strength is still important, but we can do some mobility piece, we can do some skill acquisition piece, we can do some agility type stuff, and like trying to apply it all into one holistic program. But man, the journey to get there was wild.
I feel like we share a very similar background in that respect. Like it was the same thing for me. So I think I got away with the first maybe like 2 or 3 years of playing American football because, like you said, getting stronger can hurt. And if you're also a bigger guy and your position on the field allows you to do that, that strength alone can take you far at the beginning. At the beginning, where like the level feels similar, like you're competing against people that have similar level of technique, similar level of physical preparation. So the limits are the same for everyone pretty much. But I remember when we played our very first game against a small team from Germany that was predominantly built on American Navy soldiers, or they were all deployed in Italy, and for fun they were playing football. So they were extremely well conditioned, way stronger than I could ever be, but they were not nearly as big as I was. They were just stronger and way more powerful. I just remember, I don't remember what the play was, but like it never happened to me before. I just was lifted off my foot, and the next thing I know, I was on the ground and they ran me over, and the guy was off my sides. Like I couldn't even react for how powerful and how fast he was. And then I realized, okay, that's more than one thing I'm missing here, because if this dude is off my sides and I didn't even see it coming, let alone I was on the ground and he ran me over, I'm clearly not as good as an athlete as I think I am. So my very first approach to it was kind of an extreme, because I went through a phase where I thought it was all about just, power. So I went from an extreme of like training as a power lifter to now I'm training only as a weightlifter. So my life was entirely like front squatting, cleaning, and do everything very explosive with awful technique. God knows how I survived to like those years of training, but somehow I did. And that kind of helped a little bit, because once you understand that you can move things faster and you feel what that feels like you kind of get addicted to it. It's not just about the weight, it's you feeling powerful. It's a whole different feeling in the weight room. So that got me quite addicted to it, but I was very limited to was bouncing between heavy squats and heavy cleans. That was as athletic as it got at the beginning. And then slowly but surely, once I realized there was more to it, I started looking into plyometrics, and that was a game changer by far. The one thing that changed my approach to programming quite a bit. And I feel like the one big mistake that I did at the beginning was for sure chasing quantity. Like my volume of training was insane. Like I did 3 years where I was in the weight room anywhere between 6 to 9 times a week, every week, on top of conditioning, on top of practicing. And I thought at that point I had to do my cleaning session. So just heavy cleans and explosive stuff. My strength session, I started playing around with like West Side and max effort, dynamic effort type of things and all that. I ended up becoming more explosive, but I also ended up becoming even bigger, which probably limited my gains to some extent. But I definitely learned a lot from it. But for sure, the one thing that changed my approach to programming was introducing like more plyometric and just speed stuff, like resisted sprints and all the type of stuff that is way more, there is a load component to it, but it's way more athletic. That really was a game changer for sure.
What was your intro to the plyometrics? What like got you like, oh, was there an article? Was there anything like that was like the OG?
Yeah, well, every Italian knows Yuri Verkozhansky, so the shock method and the depth jumps, because Verkozhansky left Russia and he moved to Italy, and it was part of our Olympic committee for about 10 years. So we learned about Verkozhansky in school. We learned about the shock method and depth jumps and all that good stuff. So that was my intro to plyometrics, if you will. Being a little silly, I just jumped into like a 1.5 meter dead jump, being 300 some pounds. So it wasn't that good of an idea. I should have done some sort of progression. So the first approach was kind of like scary and intimidating because I was hurting. Everything was hurting. I just remember my left knee was hurting for like a month and a half. I couldn't even drive my car because I couldn't bend my knee in my car to drive it. So it was pretty bad. But that kind of like showed me the importance of actually programming things and growing into an exercise, learning how to do that first, take it a step back, lower the load, focus on the skill, get the movement solid, and then eventually start. Up until that point was like, if I'm supposed to do 300 pounds, I'm going to do 350 pounds. I'm going to find a way to deal with that. And that approach to plyometrics actually changed my mind quite a bit. And I started appreciating program design a whole lot more than I used to.
Dude, and you are like the way you were talking about your learning process is something that I think is kind of severely missing in our age of information, to where everybody's just spammed with information and then they take in this information and like, I know that information. It's like, you know, some of the information, but like there's nothing like actually going to go do, okay, I hear about plyometrics. I'm going to actually go try plyometrics. Like, oh, okay, I read in the book this freak was doing that. I can fucking go do that. I'm gonna go. And you learn in such a way in which you will never forget what that depth drop felt like. You know what I mean? And you will never
100%.
forget that for your athletes that you program going forward with. And that is something, man, I just feel like we really, and I'm not saying go experiment with your athletes. I think just so many strength coaches, I get this question all the time. It's like 18-year-olds. It used to be like 22-year-olds asking this question. Now I have 18-year-olds in high school saying like, hey, I want to be a strength coach. Like, how should I start this up? Like, I'm done with sports. I'm like, you're 18. You're not done with sports, bro. Like, you have 5 more years. Like, push it until you're 23, 25, 28, whatever, of actually going and training yourself and like pushing for peak performance yourself. That is how you're going to become a good strength coach, man. Like, you learn so much just being the mad scientist on yourself, especially with a body that is like capable of. I don't think you should do these things when you're 40. You're not going to recover from them, and like those mistakes are going to be catastrophic. Instead of your knee hurting, it's going to be like your Achilles blowing out. Like, but man, it's just crazy. It's almost like these coaches, because Instagram puts it all in front of their faces, like they want to fast forward so many steps. And I'm like, man, we need to go live and breathe some of these things, some of these concepts that we're hearing, because everything sounds great on Instagram and it's packaged up great on Instagram. It's like, go and live it, go and see it, go and like actually live and breathe and learn these things with yourself. And those lessons are not lessons you forget.
Yeah, that's 100% the way I feel. And, you know, like at least my generation, especially growing up in Italy, where strength conditioning wasn't a thing, we didn't know what we didn't know. Everything was exploring. Everything was new to us. And we kind of had to put ourselves through that and understand just by doing things. Nowadays, kids are overly exposed to all sorts of possible career outcomes, information, education, lack of education and content that are kind of like misleading. It's confusing, and it tends to give them a false sense of direction when it comes to like, what do I need to do to become, not to get a job, to actually be good at my job. It's a whole different thing. You don't want to get a job. You want to get a job that you're good at so you can make a career out of it. And that's why I see a lot of our students, they go into strength and conditioning. They want to do that as a career. They land a job. They haven't prepared for that job. You see them 5-6 years down the line that they've changed their career path. Now they're doing something different, because it's students, especially the younger one, they don't appreciate how competitive our industry is. Like, there's only that much that you can accomplish without knowing what you're doing. At some point, it will show. You either know what you're doing or you don't. And if you don't, things are going to go in a direction where like sooner or later, you'll have to change path, change career, do something else in life. So you better want to be prepared soon and take your time, experience, learn it. School is only an aspect of it. School can only bring you that far. The other aspect of it is like, you need to train and you need to train people. There's no way around it. You don't need to be Mr. Olympia. You don't need to be an NFL player, but you need to put yourself through some sort of structured training long enough to understand the physiology and the psychology behind it. Because a lot of what we do as practitioners, it's communicating about what we do more than just doing it. Well, you mentioned that earlier, that buy-in from the athlete. The buy-in doesn't come from the program you put on paper. It comes from communication. And how well you can communicate what the process is to people that are trusting you with their with their career, which is a pretty big deal. So people need to experience what it means to like train people before they can even consider doing this as a career.
So with all that in mind, how do you balance that with your athletes? Like, I mean, you see people, they see the program of like, hey, 40-inch vert or 4 or 5 40 and in 8 weeks, but they don't see all of the work that goes behind it of like, hey, this person has been training for 5 years to build the foundational aspects and concepts so that when they run this 8 week program, it doesn't blow them up. And also, I feel like people get caught up in, they see something like that and they just add that on top of everything else that they have. And there eventually is a give and take. You can't just add on 40-inch vert, 4 5 40, 315-pound snatch, 5 minute mile all on top of each other and expect to like come out the other side. So how do you balance all of these different competing attributes and traits with like athletes you work with or students that you help teach?
That's a great question. And, maybe you know where I'm coming from, but in the world of cycling and track cycling in particular, uh, and I say that with absolutely, this is not like a negative thing. It's just an observation. But we do look up to other countries that traditionally have done better than us when it comes to like Olympics or bigger competition in sprinting. I'm thinking about like the Netherlands or the UK or Germany sometimes. And back in the days, you couldn't really know what those athletes were doing because there was no way to learn about it. Whereas nowadays, all athletes have social media and they post their workouts and they post what they're doing. And our athletes see that. And their association is if that guy is doing that particular split squat and he's the fastest cyclist in the world, that must be the reason why he's the fastest cyclist in the world. And they want to do it. And they want to train that way. And they want to do crazy things that they clearly can't afford doing that, meaning that their body is not quite prepared for that. And yes, they can physically perform the exercise, but their chances of getting hurt from it or potentially harming their performance is much bigger than the potential benefits from it. So how do you explain that? You can't really explain that. You have to kind of like guide them through the process and bring them to understand that everything is a progression. And in that progression, every athlete is different. What works for one doesn't work for others. To be quite honest with you, and that's probably not the best answer, but I am very much performance oriented and performance driven. Like, I don't care about you feeling good about yourself because you like the training you're doing. You want to win in competition. You want to bring home a medal, or you want to at least PR. So if that's what you want to do, you're investing your energy as an athlete. I'm going to give you the program that I know it works, and we're going to go in this journey together. If you want to have fun in the weight room, then fun is a whole different thing. If you're training for performance, this is the program that is going to deliver performance to you. We'll do it together. We test and retest. If you're going better, if you're getting better, I win. If you're not getting any better, let's have a conversation about it. But until we go through this process together of at least testing and retesting and focusing on not how heavy you squat in the weight room, how faster you're getting on track, because that's how you win medals. I don't care if you feel good when you leave the weight room. You need to go on a bike, put your helmet on, and go faster. That's your only goal. Once we get there together and we see that the needle moving up, your performance getting better, then the program is good the way it is. If we don't get there, then we can reassess and bring in some of these maybe influences from the outside and start reasoning through that and make small changes to the program. But unfortunately, through different experiences with different athletes, different sports, I came to realize that there needs to be a point of like, communication is the foundation of what we do. And behind that communication is trust and respect for each other. I trust you as an athlete, respect you as an athlete. You trust me as a practitioner, you respect me as a practitioner. So when it comes to your feelings, emotions, and potential like injuries or preferences, I'm here to listen. But when it comes to putting the program on paper, I'm the practitioner, you're the athlete. So clear roles and responsibilities. If we want to do that for performance, this is the only way it's going to work. If you want to have fun with that, then you can go pay a personal trainer. You can have fun with a personal trainer. But they're two different things. And if you set that clear line of communication from the beginning, I think now you have room to grow together and get better together. But if it's just the wild, wild west and everyone has opinions and everyone can say what they want to do, then it becomes a problem. So it's all about communication, I think.
Yeah, two things you said there. One, I liked how you said like if we fail, we can reassess. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that a lot of athletes, especially in their midst of their career, are scared to do. But it's one of the only things that you can actually learn of what training is going to work for you. So like if you're always scared to fail in just the short term, you're not going to find that you're potentially not going to find that program that like leads to the best performance. And then I also liked how you said like performance is different than fun. But then generally, when the needle is moving upwards and your performance is going, you generally start to have that fun in almost a different way. You're like, oh yeah, like my performance is going better. Like I'm seeing direct improvement to what I'm trying to improve. And that like leads the session to be fun because you have faith that it's working.
And that taps into, and we're not going to go down that route because it's probably going to be boring for people listening, but that taps into like internal and external motivation and why you're motivated to do what you do. Like if you genuinely care about being the best athlete you can possibly be, your fun and your rewarding comes from your performance getting better. And your performance is ultimately what you do for your sport. It's not how heavy you lift in the weight room, because otherwise you'd be a power lifter or a weightlifter. It's how much faster you can go on a bike or run or jump, whatever the case may be for the sport. And in that process of figuring out what works for you, you will fail. There's no doubt about it. We will all fail. Practitioners and athletes. Failing is part of the business. If you need to fail, fail fast, measure it, and learn from it. Because that's the only way that is going to protect you long term. It's not a matter of like not failing. Not failing is impossible. Even if you were to apply the best, most sounded evidence-based program, and even if you were to have all possible technology available and all possible like medical support and physiology and psychologists and all that good stuff, you are still going to fail. The higher the bar, the easier it is to fail. Think about like at the beginning of your career, pretty much everything you do is going to make you better. As you progress through time, moving that needle becomes more and more and more difficult. And that means that your chances of getting it wrong are exponentially higher. So we are going to fail. It's part of the game. Whether or not you are first, willing to do that fast, second, open to admit when you fail and be objective in the way you analyze why you fail, that to me, that's learning and that's long-term gaining performance. And I see, especially like I'm not going to go long on this, but I come from a generation of practitioners where like technologies were not available in the weight room. Like I grew up with no VBT, no force plates, no anything like that. The younger generation of practitioners, they come out of school and they know how to use force plates and accelerometers and all that good stuff. So their approach to data becomes like almost like a safety net. Like ultimately, our job is to get athletes stronger and more powerful. If those two metrics are not going up, your peak force and your peak power output, if those two metrics are not moving, it doesn't matter how many metrics are changing on your freaking force plates. You're not getting the job done. You're just finding excuses to justify why you're failing. So you're not learning from it because you're not changing what you're doing. So you need to be very objective and strategic in the way you set your goals and not just like hide behind the bush or find excuses for why things didn't work out. You need to be very objective and willing to admit that something went wrong and it's time to reassess. And that's usually is a two-way street. It's your input as a practitioner, but it's also the athlete bringing his or her own experience to the table. So that's where like teamwork really happens.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to like. You were mentioning this, but like, how do you know when you fail as a strength coach when there is so many factors that go into every individual athlete that you're working with, and you also have the aspect of like succeed. Like I have so many times been a part of a program where it's like we are 100% succeeding despite of what we are doing, not because of, right? Like Tristan and I were talking yesterday on a podcast where when you're at a school that just has an influx of talent, right? And I'm sure you see this in the foreign countries that you're talking about where your athletes are looking at their training methods and they're like, the training method is what made them. It's like, well, their probably culture allows them to have 100 elite athletes, and our culture puts those 100 elite athletes into different sports and different things that they value more, they get paid more to do, right? So their culture can succeed despite of, we have to succeed because of. And with all of these things going on, like how as a strength coach do you look at it and be like, okay, this was a programming issue, this was a me issue, this was a communication issue versus this was a fluke. This was the athlete not giving intent, whatever it is, like with everything that's going on, or they fell on the track and like you could have the perfect program, everything was going right, and then something like that happened. Like, how do you know? And then you also have the other end of it where, like, again, you see this American football here is probably the worst, where this is like you can have hundreds of injuries, things going all wrong, but you have so much talent that you can win, like despite of all of these things. And then it's like, okay, well, I did my job as a strength coach. We won the national championship. It's like, yeah, but 30% of your roster was hurt, and you guys just out recruited the rest of the teams. And again, I have been at the heart of not where the injuries were, but it's like with the way we are practicing. It's like I was talking to him about like, hey, our load in these practices is stupid. The way we do these things is probably like, and their response was, yeah, but we're winning. It's like, yes, but we're not winning because of these things. We're winning because we're really good recruiters. We're winning because we have really good resources and we can bring in phenomenal athletes, and we're more talented than other teams, and we don't want to admit that we're just more talented than the other teams. So like, how do you piece that together as a strength coach to understand, okay, we are failing and we need to make that switch, or there's these other factors going into play here?
That's a beautiful question. And I think my answer will probably disappoint you because how simple it is. But to get to that answer, it took me about 15 years worth of lots and lots of errors.
So write this down.
I think first of all, you'll never be able to know exactly what works and what doesn't. The level of confidence no one will ever be able to give you, because there's so many factors affecting performance. However, the only time where I feel like you won't be able to answer the question, but a way to answer the question is you need to gain control over the training process. And that control comes from controlling variables and be able to measure. So once you start simplifying your approach by a lot, when it becomes very standardized and very repeated over time, so the variables are less, and you can measure them, then you will never have the answer, but you see a trend, and that trend will point you in the right direction. So I'm never going to be the one to say that is the one metric that if you improve, you're going to get better at. I'm in no position to give you that answer. I honestly think no one is in a position to give you that answer, because the example that you just did is beautiful. Like, even if you were to train, if the three of us were to train the same exact sport at the same exact level, let's say American football, for instance, our team will play that sport differently, and they will play the sport with a different pool of talent. So what works for me doesn't work for you too, and the other way around. So there's not such a thing as giving you the answer that is going to fix the problem. But if you streamline your process and everything starts to align in a way that you can measure and see a trend, so a direction of improvement, then you know what success looks like in terms of accomplishments. And over the years, I have developed my own way of measuring it, just because my way of training is very formulaic and is very repetitive. I'm very methodical in the way I monitor variables of training, like intensity, load, and all that good stuff. But my exercise selection and my approach to periodization hasn't really changed much over the years. But once you start measuring, and like you want everything to move to a trend where like your PR in competition improves, or if you're a soccer player, your KPIs are improving, or whatever tangible way of measuring performance you have available, it's improving. At some point, you sooner or later, you'll see that you're either moving in that direction or you're moving away from that direction. It's inevitable. Numbers don't lie. So once you start eliminating one thing at a time and be methodical, you don't know what to eliminate. You don't know what to keep. But if you rotate through things until that trend changes, there you have the answer. So it's disappointing as an answer because there's not an answer to it. It's a case-by-case situation, but the answer is the method. And that's why we try to teach our students. Like, you don't need to bring me 30,000 different metrics to measure performance. Bring me an handful of metrics that you know you can rely on. Bring me metrics that have a meaning, that you can measure, that you have normative data on, and that you have control over. Meaning, if one of those metrics is not changing, do you know what to do to change it? And if one of those metrics is changing in the opposite direction that you want it to change, do you know how to fix that? Once you start developing that system of controlling chaos, because ultimately it's chaos, once you start controlling it, then trends will emerge and you know what direction to move. And all of us are different. We all have different training philosophies, different preferences. We all use, I'm sure that if the three of us were to program, I don't know, the same back squat with VBT or whatever, a power clean, we have our own way of doing it. We have our preferences and we have our biases, and that's okay because we're all practitioners and we can do things differently. As long as we can control that, measure it, and see a trend and a change that is the one that we're hoping for. I don't know if he answers your question, but that's the best I can do.
Oh yeah, that was good.
That was really good. One of the things you talked about was earlier that new people coming into the field, they have all this stuff. And that was something we recently talked about, the downward trend in cost and the upward trend in availability of all this sports science stuff. And I was telling Austin, I'm getting all these targeted ads for the OVR stuff, and I can basically get like an OVR sports science lab delivered to my house for $1,000. And it's hard to know what to do with all the metrics because it provides you with so much. What would you say, like in general? I know it's kind of an on the spot because there's so many different answers, but what would you say is like one of the most useful pieces of equipment and some of the most useful metrics that you found that like can apply meaning for coaches? Like when they're not getting lost in the 59 metrics that a Hawkin revolved force plate provides, or all these different spots on the curve that a VBT device can provide. Like what are a few devices and a few different key metrics that you think provide a lot of meaning and validity?
That's a wonderful question. That's exactly what we teach here at PLNU. Let me give you an example, like a very practical one. I'm not going to name the brand because almost every single possible commercially available brand of force plates will have the same issue, all of them. It's the technology, it's not the brand. But let's say that you're using force plates to do, let's call it like a counter movement jump test or an isometric mid-thigh-pull test or whatever the case may be. Let's call it a counter movement jump. And you set your target and you say, okay, like that's very, very cliche. Like I think everyone can relate to it. You want to increase your jump height, right? That's your goal for a training program. And now you have this thousands of dollars of force plates to measure that jump height. And you measure baseline. You test your athlete, they're jumping, I don't know, 40 centimeters, whatever. You train them for 8 weeks, you test them again, and you realize that they're not jumping that much higher. But then because you spend so much money on those force plates, they need to show you that you're right. So you go through the metrics and you say, look, the jump height didn't improve, but the rate of force development improved. And now you have this list of 12 different possible iterations of the same metric showing you that that rate of force development improved. What we show our students to do is like, okay, take a step back for a second and just, I know that no one likes statistics and even less when it's applied to technology, but look at these variables, look at these numbers, look at their coefficient of variation, and look how volatile and fragile they are in terms of measurements. They're not showing you anything. It's probably all random. It's noise, it's background noise. Those metrics are not validated. They're there because companies need to build value for their product, and having a longer list of metrics justify why they're asking you for so much money for those devices. It's marketing ultimately. And you don't have to fall into that because it's the same thing that everyone does. So in that respect, it all comes out to like education, like read papers, don't have a bias or a preference, look at what's available and try to make sense out of it. And you realize that out of all possible devices, no matter where you buy them or where you get them from, the metrics that we currently are capable of measuring outside the lab. So if you don't have the budget of a research lab, you're in a weight room, within the confine of a weight room, you can probably rely on peak isometric force for like an isometric mid-thigh pull, which is a great measurement of capacity. It's a number that you can control. We have normative data for it. You can standardize it by body weight. It's pretty reliable. If you learn how to perform the test, that's going to be a reliable number. Jump height is a great metric to go by. Concentric power, it can be a good metric to go by. And if you're lucky to have a decent linear position transducer, probably bar velocity is another good metric to go by. It's an handful of them. I show our students, like when you do a single counter movement jump on a force plate, you get 263 numbers out of it. Extremely overwhelming. And it's marketing. It's there to confuse you so you feel like you're doing a lot where probably you're not doing anything because you're missing the point. You're not looking at the numbers that really matter. So in that respect, and it's not their fault. Like these companies are in business ultimately to make profit. Otherwise, they would be a no-profit organization, right? Like they need to pay bills and keep the doors open, so they need to sell their products, and they're doing that to an extent in a way that is as fair as possible in a very competitive market. But it's up to us using those devices to know what we're dealing with. And we have an entire course here at PLNU, and we teach how to understand what's inside the black box. Don't trust the information they're spitting out. Learn where that number is coming from. Learn if you can rely on it. Learn just enough physics and mechanics and statistics to know if those numbers are reliable. And you realize that the handful of metrics that you can really trust are always the same. Force, power, jump height, some metrics for metabolic testing like lactate concentration or VO2, like those are the metrics that you can really rely on. So if you start using them to monitor your program, and the change that you see in your athletes is actually indicative of a change in performance and is not random or by mistake or by fluke, well, then that trend starts to emerge, right? You don't want to have background noise. You want to make sure that what you're measuring is actually indicative of a change and not random. So once you streamline your process so much, then you can start relying on some solid piece of technology in the weight room. And my go-to will always be, depending on the budget, of course, because budget is the biggest limiting factor, but will always be, if I could choose a decent set of portable force plates and a linear position transducer, if you have those two, you can do a lot of monitoring. You can do a lot of testing. You can use them in training to monitor training as you go. I think those are probably the most valuable piece of equipment for at least a strength and conditioning coach in the weight room. If we go to a field, maybe like a decent set of timing gates would be nice to have, but that's pretty much the extent of it. And I always actually, it's in one of their assignment for the class that we take next quarter. Every time start from the gold standard, but then find a way to get to the same metric with something that is cheaper, because ultimately your bottleneck, like your wall that you're going to hit against is always going to be budget. If you can work around that, then you have a future in this industry.
Dude, that's whole rants. I push a lot of the young people that talk to me about programs is this science fictions book, dude. And they talk about this thing. It's how fraud, bias, negligence, and hype undermine the search for truth. And I think for the most part, the strength conditioning field is way less fraud and way more bias and hype around things. Where you were talking about how you'll have this science experiments of, I want to increase their vertical. It doesn't happen. Dude, that situation happens so many times. We're like, yeah, but this. It was like, yeah, but that's not what you were going for. And it just, the numbers allowed you to find something. And they talk about how well-meaning practitioners with these bias or with this hype going into something, and they talk about it a lot too, like as a strength coach, and they don't say strength coach, they say scientist, you want to make a difference. Like that's your body. Like that's you, and you should want to make a difference as a strength coach. And so if you go into it like wanting to make a difference and you don't make a difference, you're going to find a way to justify how you made a difference. But that doesn't mean you actually made a difference. And that means you're less objective. And this book is super cool because it goes into how there's a lot of just trash science that we take and accept. But then I'm like, man, we do this in the strength conditioning field all the time, especially with this influx of now we do have the ability to have this science and have these data pieces. And again, I don't think most of it is because they talk about how there are scientists that knew they were lying. Like they knew they were doing this, they were doing it for money, whatever it was. I would say 90% of strength coaches are not that. It's that they are lying to themselves on accident. They're lying to themselves because they have these biases and this hype going in that really does undermine their science experiments of the team that they're working with. And whatever, if you want to feel good about that, but all that does, like you said, just adds noise to, okay, what actually works and what doesn't.
That's beautiful. And I feel like in this whole picture, and I love the way you phrase it and describe it. I think it's what really gets to us in this industry is the hype. We're all in to do well. We want to do well. We want our athletes to do well. So we get very excited about things. Where I don't think many of us are in this business to hurt people or take advantage of people. We want athletes to get better. We just get very fired up when we see things that may have a potential, and we just go down the rabbit hole with that. But in this whole thing, in this whole process of like assessing and trying to be as objective as possible, I think the weakest link and the one that only experience can fix, no formal education will ever be able to do, is at some point in your program design, whether it is when you're doing a day worth of training or a longer block of training, there's going to be a point in time when you as the practitioner will have to take responsibility and accountability to choose what you put value on. Like the example that you just said, I am going to invest into increasing your jump height. That's my decision as a practitioner because I put value in that metric. And the moment you put value on the wrong thing, and that can happen to everyone with the best intention in the universe, can always happen to put value on the wrong thing, then everything that follows that decision will move away from your goal and will move away from your target. But of course, it wasn't intentional. Like I use this, and this is a very nerdy example that half of my students don't get because they don't like F1 or racing, but I love F1. If you know anything about car racing, like Mercedes was dominating for like a decade. They're the best car, the fastest car possible. And then all of a sudden they showed up 2 years ago and they were nowhere on the grid. They couldn't go fast. They couldn't fix it. They had the same budget, the same engineers, the same group of people. What happened? That out of all possible simulations in the wind tunnel over the winter, they picked the one wrong metrics to chase. And the entire car was designed around that metric. All their investment went around one metric that happened to be the wrong one. They were chasing the wrong metric. And that destroyed 3 seasons worth of work because you pick one and then you have to stick with it. And then all the development goes around the same metric and you just move away and away and away from your target. And that can happen to anyone.
I mean, that's how we started off in strength conditioning with the 1 rep maxes. Like that's the bigger, faster, stronger, like we put everything into one basket and we're like, oh shit, we got laid out on the football field.
And that where the integrity piece comes into it. And like, okay, you're definitely doing something that is not working. It doesn't matter how cool or sexy it is, but it's not working. Just reassess and objectively look at what you're doing and use that mistake, error, or lack of performance as a learning experience. But there's always going to be, and I tell to all my students, like, you can't beat yourself too hard. Like, there's going to be a time where you're going to take a decision, it's going to be the wrong one. It happened to everyone, and it's going to continue to happen. But if you keep an open mindset, you'll be able to spot when that happens and correct immediately and react so that if you did a mistake, it's not going to be too big of a mistake that you may regret or might compromise your season or even your job at some point. So it's always good to keep an open mind and reassess the way we do things quite often.
So with that too, what's the point at, and this is a pretty sticky question, of sticking with something because like, hey, there might be an immediate drop in performance, right? And so like sticking with something long enough to come out on the other side versus sticking with something so long and just being like, no, just give it more time, just give it more time, just give it more time. Like what is in your opinion a way to like, when do you have to just cut parachute and just bail on the whole thing and start anew? Or like, when do you just be like, hey, trust me, I know we're getting worse right now, but like we need this for later. And those are two very different things.
That's a beautiful question. And we lived through that quite often with the cycling team because the way we do periodization, it's very much using a block approach. So when they're in their strength phase, everything is heavy. There's a lot of volume. When they go on a bike, they go slow. So it's not showing good signs of progress. But we know that at some point, it will turn around. They will start getting faster and get used to it. They get more explosive. I feel like the only way to answer that question, that's not my answer. I took it from, I don't know if you guys read any of the books that Bondarchuk published, but like all these methods of periodization, they're all trial and error. Like you can't really figure out an answer to that question, like how long you should stick with that until things change. It's a bit easier in sports where you compete in a single event because you have your training block, whether it is like 6-8 weeks, 6-8 months, maybe a year if you're working for national or something. Worst case scenario, you throw away 1 year, which is not ideal, but the greater scheme of things, it's a learning experience we're doing. You just stick to what you put value on again, and you just go with it until you get to the point where the value needs to be in a way assessed or measured. And if you fail and the result is not there, well, then you learn that probably that wasn't the best way to do it. I don't think there's maybe I don't have the answer for that, but I don't think there's a way to say how long that's gonna take. That's the most difficult part. Like, how long is that going to take? But that analysis has a flip side to it, which is sometimes we don't ask ourselves that question because our performance keeps getting better, but we don't ask ourselves, can we do even better? What about we change things that can actually get you much better than what you're getting now? It's a tricky question because it goes both ways. We can get worse, but we could also get much better at what we're doing if we reanalyze what we're doing. I feel it comes down to planning. Like you put value on something, you design your program, you give yourself a goal, you either made it or you didn't. And if you didn't, timing at that point doesn't even become an issue anymore because you didn't get to what you were supposed to do. So your chances of changing that outcome in the future are slim. So something needs to change. And hopefully that eventually, if you do that short-term goal or like retest often enough, that will prevent you from throwing away a lot of time. But the actual timing of it, I don't think anyone would ever be able to give you a final answer.
Dude, and the thing that gets complex there too is like the timing and what that person needs is it's truly an N of one, you know, like there was a like as much like as dumb as my original strength conditioning program was, getting strong and just become a beefcake, like it didn't make me the best athlete possible, but it built up a huge fucking foundation for years down the road to be able to draw upon. So like when I say I trained smarter later, it's like I was also able to train smarter because I had that massive like foundation of strength, you know? And I think understanding when, where, what that specific athlete needs and is going to get out of it. And it's like the same program you can put two different athletes on. You can go as simple as like a wide ISA athlete versus a narrow ISA athlete. Like you see this a lot with gyms. It's like, yeah, my program works. It's like all of your athletes are the same. It's the survivorship bias. If you throw out, let's say, every narrow ISA, like high velocity based athlete, they just don't work with you, right? And maybe that's just part of your scheme of like, I work with this type of athlete and that's my thing. But most coaches are not saying that. It's like, just my program works. It's like your program works with a very specific set of bulldogs, or your program works with a very specific set of like speed racers, man. But it's like, what about the N of one when a different athlete comes to you or in a different part of their training journey or what they need? And I think that's another thing that makes it even more complex is, again, your program can be good. It's not saying objectively your program's bad. It's just bad for that athlete or bad for that certain set of athletes. And that's not something we love to admit as strength coaches either. It's just like, it's all black or white.
What you said is literally day one in our course. Over the summer, we teach a course called Advanced Strength and Conditioning. It's all about program design. And on day one, we put on the board all acute training variables. So intensity, volume, frequency, and all those the list of variables. And the last one we put is athlete. Your athlete is a variable. That program is working for that athlete. You remove that variable, is no longer the same program. You can't say that just because on paper is the same. You remove the athlete, that program is a different program. It's a different dose response. It's a different starting point. It's going to be a different endpoint. So you can't assume that a program is working. A program is working for that athlete. And things get very complicated where you have, and that's common in all team sports, where you have several athletes that unfortunately, because of time constraints, they have to go through a program that is nearly identical or very, very similar. That's where I think that's where the art of coaching comes into play, where you say you clearly have massive time constraints. You're probably underpowered when it comes to coaches in the weight room. So you can't really give everyone undivided attention. So you have to find the best way possible to balance that individuality in the program design, where you give every athlete what you think they need more than others, but it gets very difficult where you have a big group of people and you are just maybe by yourself or with one assistant.
You have 98 athletes and 3 barbells.
Yep. Yep.
So you've said test and retest, and I really like that. And one thing we talked about with a recent guest was different tests requiring different amount of outputs. Like doing a simple hands on hips counter movement jump isn't the same as doing a full effort VO2 max test. And especially with athletes, how when you're programming for athletes, like maybe these track cyclists, doing a 5-second standing start is much different than doing a full on kilo, like a max effort race kilo. But to get the information you need to like be testing enough. So how do you balance that like testing into your training and balance full training days that might not have the total volume that you're looking to accumulate at this time with the, hey, this we need to be doing this much volume, but our testing isn't going to be as good at this time?
Great question. Well, the politically correct answer would be you kind of like prioritize your tests and you go from the most invasive to the least invasive. And the ones that are very physically demanding and taxing, you try to do that not very often. And that can be like, I think realistically, I think like, let's say like an FTP test or a VO2 test or something that requires a lot of physical effort, which means that it's going to get you tired, but also you need to be in a good condition to be able to do it. You're probably going to do every 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, not very often. But I feel like if you find a way to take the tests that are not that invasive, like a counter movement jump, like an isometric mid-thigh pull, a squat with VBT, it's a test in and of itself because it's giving you a metric. When you can take those tests and build them into your training program, that becomes the most applicable way of doing what sports scientists call athlete monitoring, that doesn't necessarily rely on actual testing days. Those are still very important, but it's showing you a change as that change happens through the weeks. So sometimes you say, look, like we're getting very good. Like I see improvement. Let's schedule an actual test and see what we're getting with that. Or maybe we're not getting any better. Maybe there's not a point in doing an actual test. Let's push it forward. Let's make some changes. So with our team, with the national team, we have embedded a tiny bit of force plates, a whole lot of VBT in our program, but we do VBT in a way that the programming aspect of it is only 5% of it. 95% is the monitoring of it, like the monitoring aspect of it. We can spot early signs of fatigue using VBT. We can readjust their volume. We can do auto-regulation using VBT. So if you really exploit those tests that are not that taxing, that gives you a chance to rely less on the tests that are more invasive.
Dude, and that's one of the things that I loved. You tweeted this out about monitoring fatigue is not to like make athletes do less. It's to allow, like, find ways to make athletes train harder. And I was like, dude, that is the best way to frame that of all time. And I think so many people, I think it does have like a negative connotation because there are so many people that only use the data to be like, we got to pull back, we got to pull back. And there's never that conversation of that's not the goal. The goal is to auto-regulate better so we can get the best training stimulus out of that athlete that day. I'm reading Brian Mann's book on velocity training right now, and he talks all about that. I'm like, dude, it's such a cool rephrasing of the way of using this technology to push for performance rather than pull back the athlete. And I think once you do that, one, you're going to get the sports coaches way more engaged. Like, it's like, we talk about how sport coaches hate this technology, and it's like, okay, well, the only time you bring up technology for them is when you're pulling an athlete out of practice. Of course they're gonna hate that, bro. Like, it's the only time you talk to them about technology. Like, I think if you just can wrap it up a little bit more in the performance side of things, like you talked about, I think the better off we're gonna be with both athlete and sport coaches' relationship to this sports science that we're using.
I know we're running out of time, and I'm going to keep it very short, but you touched on a very important topic, which is auto-regulation. And you mentioned the best source in terms of auto-regulation because Dr. Mann is the go-to for sure. But for our listeners, so at least we get that point across once and for all, auto-regulation lasts 1 day in the gym. If you need to auto-regulate more than 1 day, you're getting things wrong. So it's okay if you need to do less 1 day in the gym. If you consistently need to do less, that's a problem with your program design. You're not recuperating. Everything we do when it comes to physical development, and that applies to endurance and strength the same, relies on progressive overload. If you're not increasing that overload over time, you're not getting better. So you can consistently pull back. Like we said, you monitor so that mostly you can do more. And those few times where you're not quite ready for it, you can pull back a little bit. But you can't consistently adjust every variable in the program because you're doing auto-regulation, because that becomes a big mess. And you're missing the most important aspect of any program, which is progressive overload.
And the way Brian Mann like talks about it too, is like you're pulling back, not to pull back. You're pulling back so that you can do more for the rest of the week or for the rest of the program. You know, it's like the whole point is just not to dig the hole. It's not to just like rest that athlete. Like I think that's such a cool like just shift in philosophy that's not talked about enough. It's not pulling back to continually pull back. It's pulling back so that you can actually get more out of that athlete the next day and the day after.
100%. And in that respect, it's good to like, I always give this analogy to our students because, you know, like we like velocity-based training. So we're very familiar with like bar velocity and load and all that stuff. But many students, younger students in particular, may not be. But a lot of them are fitness enthusiasts, so maybe they like running every now and again. And I tell them the same thing. Like if you want to train for a 5K, to run 5K faster, well, you gotta know your pace. Your pace is what's gonna make you go faster, and that pace is objective. That's your external load. If your pace is 5 minutes per kilometer, that's how fast you can run, and you consistently look at your heart rate when you're fatigued and use it as an excuse to run slower, well, guess what? When you go around the 5K, you're going to be slower because your output capacity is compromised. So you need to rely on objective measurement of actual workload, like bar velocity or pace. Those are objective, not subjective or internal load, like heart rate or rating of perceived exertion or whatever the case may be, because those may be deceiving. In track cycling, everything is about power. Power is as objective as it can possibly be. Doesn't matter how you feel. If you're putting out more power, you're good. If you're putting out less power, you're not that good. So in that respect, auto-regulation keeps you honest. It shows, okay, your internal load may be coming up. We need to adjust a few things for one day so that the next time or the next workout that is important for you, you can do the workload that you're supposed to do to progress, overload, increase, and get better. So objective metrics are key in auto-regulation.
That's amazing because I think some people just don't have that internal load or RPE thing, and they treat learning that as not a skill. Like you need to do hard sessions, you need to do a bunch of different things to learn what your different RPEs are on different days. I work with some firefighters, and we have a cadet class right now, and they were doing a bike session. It was a pretty demanding bike session, but the second half, they all like produced higher watts, and we have the concept twos, which have a good measure of force and watts right there, and they were all able to push more the second time. And when they finished, like, I didn't know I could like go that hard. And it was like, yes, that was what we were looking for. Like when I say RPE 7, 8, like that is how you should be feeling. Like we should be coming up to that time duration at the end, and you should be feeling very tired. And the fact that you're able to hold that consistent thing, all three of those, when it was much higher after you've already accumulated fatigue than the first half, shows that like, hey, we can train at that level, and this is actually where it's supposed to be. And it was like a big light switch moment of like, oh, I didn't realize that it was like okay to feel that bad during this.
I'm glad you said that because I feel like one of the biggest problems of them all with the younger, like the younger athletes, ultimately like last generation of athletes in their 20s or early 30s, is that because of what they learn from social media and what they're exposed to and this all hype about recovery modalities and recovery tools, they start to be afraid of being tired.
Dude, those Whoop scores infect your brain.
Dude, you are training. You're supposed to be tired. You're also supposed to be able to recover and get back and train harder. It's okay to be tired. It's not okay to be chronically tired. They're two completely different things. But nowadays, like an alarm like shows up immediately as they see like, I don't know, their Whoop dipping or their HRV or whatever metrics is showing their recovery dipping. They feel like they freak out. They need to get a massage. They need to get like cold therapy, supplements, whatever the case may be. Dude, you trained yesterday. It's normal that you're tired today. Just make sure that you do what you're supposed to. You take care of your body. That number will naturally come up and you'll be able to train again. You don't need to spend $3,000 to speed up the recovery by 6 hours. You're going to get there no matter what. Just take care of your hydration. Take care of your nutrition. You don't need any supplement. You need any guru stuff. Get your sleep, relax, and things are going to get better if your program is sounded. Now, if you're chronically tapering down, well, that's a problem, but that has to do with the program. It's not that you need to do more recovery stuff. You need to have better programming. So there are two different problems.
Hell yeah, dude. That's a dope answer. I have one very last question. You don't have to go into it like full detail, but I am getting more into the velocity-based training stuff. After I finish up my current phase, I'm going to run basically a full-on I'm making myself program all of my stuff based off velocity-based training, and we're going to see how it goes. So I'm running like a 3-month program based off that coming up here. How do you do that with your cyclists? Like, what's your actual approach? How are you working with it? What are the numbers you're looking to hit with them? Like, what's the sheet look like? Are you just looking at the data to be like, okay, I program sets and reps and percentages like normal, and you're just looking at the velocity stuff? Or are you telling them they need to hit certain velocities, they're going to a certain drop off? Like, what's that look like in your actual programming right now when you're using this velocity-based training?
So we used two different approaches to monitor mostly volume. Off season, which is, in my opinion, the most important time of the year, because that's where you actually build performance. We use so this is not the original term. I adopted this term when I translated Bosco's book. It's the original way of doing velocity-based training, just Bosco never called it open set. I had to come with a term when I translated the book in English because there was no term in Italian that gave that idea. An open set means that you pick your exercise. For a cyclist is 9.9 times out of 10 is going to be a back squat. So you pick your exercise, you have profiled that exercise, which means that you know precisely what's the heaviest possible load that you can move at the target velocity, which for us in the squat is about 0.5 meter per second. And then you do your warm-up, you put the load on the bar, so everything is ready. You connect your VBT device, whatever that device is, and then you don't know how many sets you're going to do, and you don't know how many reps you're going to do. You're just going to go by velocity loss, intraset, and interset. So every set, you continue doing reps until you drop below 0.4, which is 20% velocity loss. You're going to give yourself ample rest time, 4 to 5 minutes. You're going to go back for another set, and another set, and another set of as many reps as you can do until the average for the set drops below 0.4. On a good day, for our guys, that's probably going to be anywhere between 8 and 10 sets. For a woman, maybe anywhere between 10 and 12. They can tolerate a little bit more volume. On a day where you're more fatigued, you will naturally cap to like 3 or 4 sets or 5 sets. We don't really prescribe volume. We just let it go and roll naturally. The only thing we care is that the load on the bar stays the same or goes up. As long as the load on the bar is not coming down, meaning you stay at the same weight, but you're moving it faster. And when you move it faster, you go heavier, so you go back to 0.5. Now we know that your power output is going up over time. And that's the one thing that we want to really focus on. And usually when we do that and we retest, all metrics associated with power have improved. The only limit with that approach is that it's extremely time consuming because you go into a session without knowing when that session is going to end, because it can be 3 sets, it can be 9 sets. You can have half a day worth of squatting. So in the in-season, we do the same identical thing. We just cap the number of sets. So we say like, this is the approach, but you're only going to do, let's say 4 sets or 5 sets. And of course, there are reasons why we pick a number. We look at the training journals for previous months, and we figured out roughly 50% of the volume. But that is by far the best approach, in my opinion, to maximize the benefit of velocity-based training.
Hell yeah.
One thing, sorry, I had another question. I know this is very cycling specific and nerdy, but the difference between like raw power output and then like aerodynamics and the ability to like be in a good position, I think is pretty overlooked sometimes on some people. So like, how do you prescribe any specific mobility to like be able to deliver these huge absolute loads in a very compromised and cramped position?
I will give you the precise answer to that question, which is the problem is not power and aerodynamics in a vacuum. The problem is where that power is lacking and it requires additional muscle mass to be generated. Meaning, if you can improve relative power output, so your power output by body weight, without affecting muscle mass, then your drag factor is going to stay or possibly decrease if you can get in a better aero position. The problem is where you train for a very long period of time and now your power output is capped. You can't get any more explosive. The only way to get more explosive is to build more muscle mass and eventually add that power. When you start building that muscle mass, your weight is going to go up and your drag is probably going to come up because you're bigger. So your cross-sectional area is going to be bigger. And that becomes a massive problem in events where, like, the best way to say that is events that are very torque dependent, where like torque is the biggest component of your performance, which means force is the bigger component of your performance, which means muscle cross-sectional area is a huge part of your performance. The bigger muscles, the guy with the biggest muscle in the best aero position will win. Same thing for the girls. That becomes a problem because now you're trading muscle mass, which can potentially decrease mobility, aerodynamics, and power, which is right in between the two. And that's where things get very, 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 very tricky. That's a very tricky spot. But at the beginning, if you can improve that power output without affecting muscle mass, there should not be a trade-off at all. Like, you should just get more powerful, and that power should go on the bike as well.
Hell yeah, dude. You lived up to the Italian hype. The Italians are 3 for 3 on the podcast. Let's go. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this, dude.
That was awesome. I had a blast. Thank you so much for having me.
Hell yeah. Thank you guys for listening. Keep chopping wood.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Yoakum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.